right. Hello, welcome back to Bridging the Gap. My name is David James.
And my name is Colin McEvers. Today we have a special guest here with us.
I'm Julie Giordano, County Executive. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first question is, if you could just tell us a little bit about how the possibility of term limits passing in Wicomico County in 2026 could impact the prevalence of young folks in politics.
Yeah, I think it sort of gives people a sense that they have a chance, right? So when you have term limits out there, you know that you're going to have, I'm assuming it's 2 terms that are on the ballot from what I understood. So we're talking 8 years. And, I think that when people see that there is an end, I think it kind of does 2 things. One, it gives people hope and opportunity that they would have an opportunity to run, that you're not going to have this career politician sitting in a role. But the other part about it is that it really puts pressure on the politician, right? So they have 8 years to, at the very most to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So I think that there's an accountability factor there where it's not like, okay, well, in the next term I'll do that, in the next term I'll do this, and I'll accomplish this. So you have, at the max 8 years to really put forth, the best thing that you want to do for the county. So I think it's good. I think it's accountability on the politician part, but then I think also it gives people hope that there is a chance for, them to run and people, other people to get involved.
Certainly, yeah, and I definitely like the idea of putting some pressure on them, like a limited time, so it's like they don't have, I'm going to be here 40 years. It doesn't matter what I do this year or that year. It just gives them that time to make a plan. So actually, when we were doing this petitioning, we ran into some local people in the area, in Wicomico, Salisbury, and one of the critiques we faced from a local Democrat regarding term limits was that it could open the door for powerful interest groups or wealthy people to buy their way into office. So what would you say your response is to that kind of criticism?
I think that could happen now. I think that we have people now that sort of fit that mold, right? So right now, the way that I feel that, like, for example, the council is structured is it's very difficult. We have Councilman James Wynn, who is on the younger side, and he is a business owner. And it makes it really difficult sometimes for him, for daytime meetings and things that happen in the daytime. So the way that the meeting or the way that the council, for example, is set up now is that it's really for that retired business owner or that person who owns their own business. I can't imagine, being a teacher or being somebody who is just starting their career and also saying, oh, by the way, I have to leave for a council meeting, or I have to do this, or I have to do that, and go here and go there. So it's really, right now, the job almost has tailored itself around a specific group. And so you have to have a good sense of security. Plus, it doesn't pay very much. So, you're not going to, get rich by becoming a councilman, which is a good thing. We don't want that to happen either. But I do think the way that it's structured sort of limits, people. I don't necessarily know if term limits are going to mean that you're going to have special interest groups. Like, I don't necessarily see that, because I feel like you could have that now. And to me, I think it's more dangerous on the other side, because if you have somebody in a special interest group and they have an unlimited amount of time that they can run, the more and more damage or the more and more that they can do, because there's not, a set time. Okay, well, we only have to deal with that person for 8 years. So I think that argument sort of I don't really see that argument at all. I kind of see it on the other way, where when you have somebody who can continuously be there, I think that causes more of a concern than anything else.
Definitely, and one of the things that I responded to when what got brought up is, well, if someone is an incumbent, they obviously have access to a lot more connections and people that might be representing these interest groups than would someone that's a newcomer that doesn't necessarily have many connections and things like that.
I 100% agree, but you have to remember too, at some point in time, and I'm not defending anybody else, but at some point in time, everybody was a newcomer, right? At some point in time. Mine was just this last term. So do I have more connections now that I'm the county executive? Absolutely, but that just happens with the role. But I worked so hard to make those connections. I was at everything, door knocking, meeting people, doing the things that I should have been doing to earn the respect of the people in the community. And I would say just recently have I really earned the trust of the business community. That was a really difficult group for me to try to penetrate and say, hey, like, I want you to trust me, and I want you, and it was hard for them, Yeah. You had John Pissota, who was in there prior to, so even though he wasn't elected, he was still the incumbent.
Sure.
And they had that trust in him because he was already doing the job, you know? So I had to earn that trust. And I think just until now, I've put out my third budget now. They see that I'm, fiscally responsible. They see that we're in a great place with the county. We're making good progress. And it took that. So they are very much an action group. You have to do those things, but everybody starts off that way. You know what I mean? So I do feel like it's an even playing field, but that's the power of incumbency. And that's another reason for term limits, because you only have that incumbency one time. You know what I mean? And then if you do get reelected, then your time is up. And then I think that there would be a smoother transition. You know that you're not going to be running again for that position. So you don't have that sense that, I'm going to keep going and I'm not going to do the things that I should do. And I think term limits also helps you make those tough decisions, because people will not make decisions because they want to get reelected, right? And so they don't do that. When you are in your last term, you're like, you know what, I'm going to make these tough decisions and I'm going to do what I have to do because, I'm not running again, or, that I'm termed out. So.
Exactly. No, definitely. And you brought up the budget, actually. I was wondering if you could kind of, I personally don't know, because I don't have too much knowledge of the process, but what typically is the process for creating and crafting a budget, and what are some accomplishments that you can kind of detail and describe in regards to the budget that's recently passed?
Sure. So it actually starts all the way back in September, October, November, because at that point in time in the fall, we're having our department heads really think about their capital improvement plan, so the CIP, so their bigger, larger projects. So we have them sort of start figuring that out. That is one piece of the budget. And then as budget season comes around in February, we start meeting with the different departments. What is it you want? What is it you need? And we tell them, put every ask in. What is it that you want? What positions do you want? What raises are you looking for? What things? And then we sort of tailor it back, from that. So we meet with everybody, figure out the wants and needs specifically of the county and what the county departments, need at that point in time. And then we start crafting it, right? And start figuring out what are our revenues, what's going to be coming in, how are we going to balance this, and how are we going to balance that. So the biggest things that I'm proud of this budget were, we kind of did like a bait and switch, right? So we do this presentation and we talk about 4 different options, and some of them were breaking the revenue cap. And I'm going to be very honest, and I can say this now, at no point in time were we ever planning on breaking the revenue cap, ever. But we put that out there, and the reason that I did it is because I wanted to see the people's reaction. I wanted to see the council's reaction. Some council members stayed quiet and just listened. There were others that went on Facebook and acted crazy. And I wanted to see that. I wanted to see their reaction. And it was good to know, is this even something that they are going to entertain later on, if it is something we have to do? And they are not. And they made that quite clear. So we knew from the very beginning that it was something we were going to put out there. I wanted to see what the public had to say. And it was very much what I expected. Those people that are very pro-education, more so on the left, are like, it's okay, we can raise taxes if you need to. If you need to break that cap, go ahead and do it. You have your very conservative people that are saying, that extra $10 a month is super important to me and my family, and that matters, And so, and we kind of knew that's where it was going to fall. But at no point in time do we ever really intend to do it. And so I think I threw them for a loop when we put the budget forward. The revenue cap was not broken. We actually lowered the property tax rate by 3 cents, which is $3 million, and we were able to fully fund the ask of education. And when I have, council president look across from me and say, why did you do that? And so I think that they were kind of thrown for a loop. So I'm really proud of the efforts that we did to make that happen. And a lot of that happened because of the relationships that we have across the bridge. I know people want to give me a hard time. They see pictures of me and the governor fist bumping and things like that. But I am going to tell you, Wes Moore and I agree on about 10% of what he does. Yeah. But we focus on that 10, right? We don't focus on the 90% that we don't get along with. I like him as a person. He's a good father. He is a good husband. Don't agree with his policies, And so, but we focus on that 10%. He's big on economic development, big on jobs, trying to make Maryland a good place to live and work. I'm not saying the policies reflect that, but I know him as a person. And so when I go to him and say, we're building, this great school at the airport, and we're going to have jobs here in Wacomico County. I have St. John's property that's building here in Wacomico County. We're getting Amazon here in Wacomico County. Yeah. We are doing those things. So economic development is a big thing that him and I focus on. So we set the differences aside and really try to work together. And what I tell people is when you work with the other side, especially in this role, that's being an adult. So, that's just what it is. Not everything has to be so partisan all the time. Right. It doesn't change your values. You know what I mean? But like you, with you being your role over at the college, you have your ideals and values and whatever else, but you have to work sometimes with the other side to try to get things done.
Absolutely. Yes. One thing with these term limits, there's criticism that even I get because, being a conservative, how can you talk to someone that's a liberal on it? Easy. Term limits is not something for a Republican or Democrat. It's something that we need. So you do need to talk to everyone. Mm-hmm. One thing I heard you said is something I always say. Normally I say the 80%, but if we can rejoice on that part that we agree upon and work on those parts that we don't, then maybe we can get more things done as a community.
It used to be about 80%, and then this budget came out, and now we're down to about it's about 90% that we don't agree on. So that sort of went down a little bit. But like I said, there's still things that we can work on together.
Sure.
And because of those relationships are why I could talk to the chair of appropriations and say, look, my county is really hurting. We have a good working relationship. What can we do? And we were able to get an extra $2.7 million, for our disparity grant, which is how we balanced, the budget with education.
Well, that's what I was about to ask too. How? Because I know I've heard some of the critics. I spend time doing research, and the critics are like, well, if you're not breaking the revenue cap, where'd you get it? How did you get it done?
That's exactly how, is because of those great working relationships that we have. With us appointing Barry Beecham in Carl Anderton's spot, it was big shoes to fill. Carl is very good and strategic about bringing money back to the county. So Barry had huge shoes to fill.
Wow.
And he did great. We got $200,000 between him and Senator Carrozza for Mason-Dixon. We got $1.5 million for our airport. We got the $2.7 in the disparity grant, $37 million for Salisbury University. But we got all of those things because of the good working relationship we have. I didn't get to work with Larry Hogan, right? So I didn't get that governor. That's not the governor that I'm working with. I'm working with Wes Moore, and he was elected by the people. And he's very aware, and people should be very aware. I didn't vote for him. I voted for Dan Cox. I was on a billboard with Dan Cox. I'm still in contact with Dan Cox. Just sent him a client the other day on the COVID vaccine. But anyway, so we're still in contact. So that's who I supported as governor, and and that's not who won. You know what I mean? And so we have to figure out a way to reach across the aisle, because at the end of the day, my job as executive is to bring the bacon home for Wacomico County, and I have to figure out a way, no matter how partisan I am, and the fact that I'm the top Trump delegate vote getter in the state of Maryland, I have to figure out how to work with a very liberal or delegation and a very liberal organization in the state of Maryland. So, but it pays off, and those what we were able to bring home for the budget shows that.
Definitely.
One last thing I want to ask about with the term limits before I turn it back over to Colin is. I had someone ask me while I was out there, actually he's a host for another show here at PAC 14, what's the window to get these term limits?
The signatures?
Yes.
So we have probably, I would say, a little less than a year before we have to turn in the first batch. So we need to turn in about 5,000 or 6,000. I think it's March. I want to double check.
March. Okay.
So my plan too is to go around. I visit fire departments. I do the municipal meetings and things like that. My plan is to bring this to the people and say, do you want term limits? And I have not met one person that has said no. All these different events that we go to, I think people are going to want to do it, and we just push it as that. This is not a conservative thing. It's not a liberal thing. It's not Republican. It's not Democrat. It's, do you want term limits in Wacomico County? And I think based on what I've seen in this role, it needs to happen. And that's on both sides, the executive side. And I'm saying that as the executive. You need it on the executive side, and you need it on the council side. If you cannot accomplish what you want to accomplish in 8 years, it's time for you to get out anyway.
So you used to be the chairwoman of the Lower Shore Young Republicans. So what advice could you give me and my colleagues, because I'm currently the chairman, for improving the chapter, kind of like mobilizing volunteers, especially with 2026 coming up, and making an actual impact in the community?
Right. I think you guys have it tricky coming up in 26 because everybody's pumped during the presidential, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And especially with this one, that this was a really big one. But I think getting people excited, and I think the governor's race is going to be one to definitely watch, So I think if you get people excited about just one race in general, if you can sell them on local politics, that's great. It's kind of difficult. People are like, what is an executive? What does she do? Or what does he do? But if you can really get them focused like on the governor's race or things like that, I think that that's one thing to do. But it's difficult. There are a lot of people that are just so like anti-politics now. They don't even want to talk about it. They don't, But I think it's really important. And I think down here, it was my goal. We had no representation, no youth representation here on the shore, like when I first started. And I went up to a meeting for the Young Republicans and saw that there was just nothing on the Lower Eastern Shore. And it was really sad. And we're such a conservative area, it's like it deserves, to have that. So I think just getting the name out there, and I think that all of us, the politicians that are in place right now, the people that are elected in place right now, they should be helping as well, getting that youth involved. And it's hard though, because youth are part of a typically liberal system with schools and universities and things like that. So, but I think that there are a lot of conservative kids out there, and I don't know if they want to be involved or things like that, but just getting them excited. So I think it'll be very beneficial if we have a good Republican candidate, because I think that will help, kind of push it. So
with the county council, do you think they're going to, in 2026? Like do you foresee any new individuals that haven't really been elected yet, like stepping in and throwing their hats into the race, maybe trying to, run for these positions that are currently kind of held by incumbents that have been there for a while?
I very much hope so. I very much hope so. I think both of the very seasoned gentlemen that are on the council have very much stated that this is their last term. We'll see if that happens. Sometimes I think it's easier said than actually giving up that power. It will be very interesting to see how this plays out. I've had numerous people reach out, but campaigning is tough. And it's not even just the campaigning, it's the finance that you have to do. It's, campaign finance, getting a treasurer, establishing it's a very difficult, process, so there's a lot to it. So if anybody wants to run for council, in 26, I'm always willing to meet with them just to talk to them about what is it like to run? What is it, to do that? And there is no at-large seats now, so we will go to a 7-district council. Okay. So you have about 15,000 people that you need to reach out to. So a little bit more of a manageable, district at that point. So, but it will be very important, for people to step up. And if people feel passionate about it and want to make that change, or want to make change and want to get in there and do that, we'll be, willing to meet with whoever. So we've had a couple reach out and we've met with them already. So we're excited.
All right, we're back, and we're joined now with my better three-quarters, Keisha James, who is does a lot of work in the community. Keisha.
Hi. When he says I do a lot of work in the community, I work with the homeless primarily. Every second Tuesday of the month, we serve dinner, a group of us, including my husband. And I just had Praise in the Park on Saturday, which was able to feed some of the hungry out there in the community. And we do that twice a year, so I really enjoy that.
I do want to comment on the Praise of the Park, because I want to give you guys credit, because nothing even deterred you from being there. And I know that you were kind of fighting the anti-Trump, save democracy, anti-Musk, anti-Doge,
no kings.
Kind of craziness. So I appreciate you just standing strong, and just being there and doing that. So.
Can I address something on that?
Yeah.
Well, the morning
Go ahead. This is my yes. Go ahead.
The morning of Praise in the Park, we get there and there's a lot going on. It's cloudy and you're like, Lord, open up the clouds, and bring out the sunshine, which he did. But, I was just feeling downcast in my spirit. And he just said 2 words, keep going, not knowing what was going to be on the other side of that pavilion. No one knew. So I just have to say, keep going.
Yeah, there you go.
Good encouragement there.
Keep going.
We're going to talk about what's happening in a place called Wetipquin. For those that have seen that word, it's Wetipquin. I'm what you would call a from there, not a come there. There's a lot of people who've moved down there, which is awesome. And since we've had our executive, she's made it very, very easy to get there as far as it goes with the roads and the dishes being cleaned out, and the attention that she, along with our West Side Task Force and Neighborhood Alliance, has done. It's been great. It really has. But we want to talk about something that's going on down there in Wetipquin, and that's the Wetipquin Creek State Park, which is kind of unique because I never knew it was a creek. We thought it was a river when I was growing up, just in the neighborhood. How did this park even come about?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the place first and foremost.
Please.
The 445, over 400 acres is owned by a gentleman named Donald Graham. And just to give you a little bit of background about Donald Graham, so if Donald Graham is a gentleman that has lived or has owned property down here, that piece of property has been in his family for generations. And when he took it over, he had an idea of what he wanted to do. Let me explain to you what this man has done in his lifetime. So he was an engineer, and he oil used to come in cans back in the day. And then now when we go and buy oil, it's in the plastic, with the little, spout and whatever. He not only designed that, but he owns the patent to that and also the machine that does it. So every bottle of oil or everything of oil that you buy, it's his design. So the man has done well from himself, and he's also designed a lot of other things. So he is an engineer. So he owns this piece of property with the house on it. And when he inherited it, he decided he was going to put, I would say hundreds of thousands, but I can be safe to say tens of thousands of dollars into that house. And what he has done is made sure that it has stayed and kept its historical presence, right? So it does have plumbing. It does have electric. However, everything else is to the T of what a revolutionary house would look like, right? His family would come down once a month. They'd spend Thanksgiving down there. He has children. He also built other houses on the property that are all historically accurate houses. There's a caretaker that he has that's on the property. And so he's kept this up. They have decided he decided a while back, which had nothing to do with me, that, the state was looking for a place to put a state park. And, he had a property available that he was like, this would be a great thing for this. It was back in early 23, we brought DNR down and we took them to several locations. One of them was Poplar Hill. So, the old, prison release place. Beautiful location, you know what I mean? So we took them there. They were not interested in that land. We took them over to Pirates Wharf and said, hey, what about a partnership park? We've done a lot of work. You could take it over as a state park. We're okay to do that.
Right.
Not interested in that.
Wow.
So there was several areas. We talked about, we were brainstorming different ideas. As a matter of fact, Greater Salisbury Committee on their 2030 plan, a state park is one of those things. Chris Eccleston was heading that up. So this has been on people's radar for a while, and we tried to do our due diligence, showing different properties, and we just kind of thought it was a dead issue. And then all of a sudden, Eastern Shore delegation has their meeting when session started, and we hear, hey, by the way, Wicomico County's getting a state park, and it's this Don Graham's property. I didn't know who Don Graham was. I didn't even know where it was. I still have never been on the property, so I've never even been down there. So I knew it was down Nanticoke Road. That's what we were told, somewhere down there. And we thought we were getting some insider information because our attorney came in and said, well, I'll show you exactly where Don Graham's property is. What we understood at that point in time is, and we said, because we were kind of upset about the Pirates Wharf thing, we're like, Pirates Wharf is so close, and it's already halfway done. What's going on here? Is this a done deal? Yes, it's a done deal. Signatures have been, the ink has dried, signatures are done. Okay. So I said, all right. So then February comes, and they have the Board of Public Works. Now, I'm going to tell people, you may think that you have a say at the Board of Public Works meeting. The decision is already made before you go into the Board of Public Works meeting.
If you're on county level.
Yeah. I mean, when I go into the Board of Public Works meeting, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these meetings, but in it, there's three people. There's the comptroller, there's the treasurer, and there's the governor. So it's three people. These are not people that you're going to sit up there and start arguing with in the middle of everybody in the middle of the state house. We're not going to do that. So, he brings me on. I'm actually on Zoom. I don't go in person, but we're on Zoom. And, we talk about this. And he said, I want to congratulate you for getting a state park because your leadership is what got us here. Now, I think what people have twisted is you knew about it because he said your leadership. What he meant is that my leadership did start this. We wanted to get a state park. We were bringing DNR down, and that's what he was talking about, is the fact of we wanted a state park here. I was about the what. I had nothing to do with the where. You see what I mean? So I think that's the biggest thing here, is that I think people are under the assumption that I was trying to hide something, not telling the people on the west side. And I'm like, Guys, I don't hide anything from the West Side. As a matter of fact,
You're
I made
very
them more transparent by having the West Side Task Force. I want to know what's going on. And never in my life did I think that so many people would be, this concerned or upset. What I have thought about with DNR and what I'd like them to do, and I'm sure these are in your questions, but what my hope is with this is because this is a done deal, DNR owes it to the people of our county to come down and say, this is what our intention is. Is this going to be like a Shad Landing where like people are going to be camping and coming in and out of here? Or is it going to be like a Pemberton Park where there may be an event, maybe, and there's trails and it's just you enjoy the nature and you enjoy the property and that's it. And I think that the people of the county deserve that. And so I think the lack of information as to what kind of state park it's going to be, I think is important to share. I just want to say this. For any homeowners out there or property owners, I know for a fact you would not want the government coming in and telling you who you could sell your property to, what you're doing with your property. People don't like that at all. You know what I mean? And so for people to sit here and say, well, Mr. Graham, he should have told the people of Wicomico County. Well, maybe he should have, but he doesn't owe that to the people of Wicomico County.
Not with his property.
No, that's his property with the state of Maryland.
Well, I can say as being a original tip necker, and those from down to Wetipquin knows what a tip necker is. I never been on that property, and I'm talking about I was born like less than a block from this place. I didn't even know it existed. Why? Because, and anybody who's from down there can say the same thing. That was their property. That was that family's property. I had a delegate actually give me a call yesterday actually and asked me, hey, where exactly is this? Now again, this is after the state already has it. All right, it's hidden. Not many people get to go there. So for Mr. Graham to actually say this isn't something that y'all saw from the road. You know what I mean?
Right.
They said, hey, this is where we're gonna put a park at. And yes, there are a lot of questions. The unique thing that I did notice yesterday while looking at good old Facebook and Meta is they've already gotten the details and description of what's going to be there. And
I don't know if I would necessarily trust that too, because I know that there was something about the kayaking and paddleboarding, and I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. But I really would like DNR to come down, and I think that would help ease some people's minds, as to what exactly is going there. The one thing that is good is that he didn't sell it to a developer. We're not getting a development down there. We're not getting a bunch of houses. We're not destroying nature. This was a way for him to have that legacy of that beautiful property live on in a way that, other people will be able to, preserve land and for other people to enjoy, And so I really think the house is really what sold it because they want to keep it in that historical trust. So I think, for what he's done and the money that he's put into that, I know what delegate you're talking about because he called me yesterday too. He walked onto the property. He said, Miss G, if you walk onto that property and your eyes are closed and you open your eyes, you feel like you're in Williamsburg. The whole idea is to keep that property beautiful, right? And keep that property, the historic value of that property. They're not going to come in and start putting in, all kinds of crazy stuff, and you're going to have water slides and doing all kinds of wild stuff like an Assateague or like Shad Landing or something like that. It's not going to be like that. So I think it is a positive. I do think it's a positive. I understand the fear that people have. They move to Wetipquin not because they want to have a ton of neighbors and a ton of traffic, right? They like that quiet, peaceful atmosphere, and I totally understand that. I don't necessarily think this is going to take away from that. I really hope not anyway. But I do think that DNR needs to give us some answers, and they're being a little unresponsive with some things, which is a bit frustrating to me because I feel like they do owe the county a little bit of an explanation, especially how it was done. I mean, it would have been nice, like, hey, here's a heads up before the ink has dried, but we just didn't get that, unfortunately.
But how does a state that's so deep in the red as we are right now be able to afford a $3 million bill for this,
right? When
we have so many parks already down there,
right? So I think the thing to keep in mind is, and I know this is going to sound crazy, the best answer I have is it's different pots of money. So it's not part of the operating budget necessarily. It's part of, it's in an acquisition, type account. So there's money set aside in different accounts, right? And so this is from a different account. This is not the, budget that he just passed or anything like that. So It's still tax money, so I mean, you're right. I mean, it absolutely is. But the best answer I have is that there was acquisition money for this, kind of set off to the side, and so that's the money that was used.
Thank you. Now, the president of the county council, John Cannon, did tell me the other day that a letter has been sent to the state to kind of halt everything for a little bit.
I do not believe that the council has the ability to write to DNR and ask them to halt anything. They don't have the ability, or right is the wrong word, but they don't have the right to ask them to do that. This is a transaction between two people that we are not privy to. So this would be an example, like you have your house, right? And let's say you want to sell your house, and you have neighbors that come in, and you're really happy about these people that are going to be coming in. And what if your neighbors aren't happy? Are you going to stop the sale of your house because your neighbors aren't thrilled with who's moving next door? If you got a letter from your neighbor saying, hey, can you please halt and not sell your house? You're like, no, I got to move. I got a job I got to go do, or I've got this to go do. You're not going to do that. And so that's where this kind of falls in. And I understand that the people are upset, but unfortunately in this case, I don't have, a way to stop it. I read the letter by the council. I thought it was a bit presumptuous to assume that we have the ability to stop a sale. I don't think that they're going to halt any process, for the people of the county. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but I just don't think it's going to happen. We find out that it's a private citizen. We're just really, our hands are kind of tied. There's really not much I can do.
That's like someone telling you can't do what you want to do with your home.
Right, exactly. Like, sorry, you can't sell that property because we don't want you to. Well, that's tough. It's mine. You know what I mean? It's my property.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to put it to you this way. I need people, if they're watching this, put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Graham. You know what I mean? Here it is that he has found a way to preserve the property that he has loved very, very much, to make sure trees aren't going to be cut down, to make sure that they're not going to develop it, with housing and things like that. And I think that he really thought he was doing a great thing for this county. And it really frustrates me. And I get why people are concerned. I get that. And I don't want people to think that I don't think their concerns are valid. But it does, kind of hurt my heart a little bit, because here is a gentleman that has this beautiful piece of property that is willing to share it with the people of the county. And I feel like since the very beginning, there's just been nothing but grief.
Here's one of the tough questions that the people out there want to know, as far as from you, being their representative, being their executive. Are you for or against having this park?
I am for having a park in Wicomico County. I want to have a state park in Wicomico County. I don't like being the only county that doesn't have it.
Right.
And we were excited to think that we were getting that, and something that we could say, hey, even though we didn't have anything to do with it, it's still something that I can say, hey, while I was executive, this was able to happen, As far as the where, it's one of those things where I could sit here and complain about the where. I think this is what concerns me. When I think of a state park, I think of easily accessible. And sometimes I don't find, all the way down, Nanticoke Road and down that way, always easy accessible. Cell service is a little tricky down there, so I'm hoping that this will promote, getting more cell service down there.
Interesting.
For me, honestly, I think it's just too early to speak. I know that there are a lot of people that are really super excited about it, but I also know that there's a handful that are concerned, and rightfully so. So, and I hear their concerns, but I am going to say, no matter where we were to put it, no matter where, I think that you would have people, there would be some complaints from here, there, everywhere.
With having this state park, would that take away from funding that I know Parks and Rec and Steve Miller have worked diligently on getting for that park? Will that take away from that?
No, because it's two totally separate things. I mean, no county revenues are going into the state park. Not one dime is going into it, because it's a state entity. So it's going to be a state-owned property. We don't put, funds into the state property.
That includes upkeep and...
upkeep is all done by the state.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is all state employee. It's all, state, run and whatever else. So it doesn't take away from our parks. I can put out there as much as I want, but you're always going to have people that are spinning it the wrong way, or making things sound the way that making it sound in a negative way. I just want everybody to know, we did not hide anything from you. We were kind of dumbfounded when we found out about it, which was in January when session started. February was Public Works, and since then, we've had some uprise, about it, and I get it, and I get your concerns. So that's why I'm hoping to get DNR down here. I'm hoping that they will, adhere to my request, and hopefully they'll at least give us some information, so that way people can, we can ask those questions. What's going to happen with the right of way? What's going to happen with the ditches?
Sure.
How are we going to handle, the roads taking in more traffic? Is there going to be another entrance? Are they going to do a different entrance? We don't know. So
As always, the executive has never been a person that says, no, I won't talk about this. He's always been ready, so I do appreciate that.
yeah, no problem. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yep,
We
yep.
definitely appreciate you. We thank you for your transparency and thank you for your work, and definitely looking forward to your next term.
Yeah, thank you.